I taught Kung Fu for about 10 years. During that time, the vast majority of my students were teenage and pre-teenage boys. One of the things that most of these boys learned by taking martial arts was that they aren't as good as they thought they were. Almost every boy that came to take classes thought that they would walk in and over the course of an hour become Jackie Chan, Jet Li, a Ninja Turtle, or be ready to start teaching me new things. Occasionally they would have experience in another martial art, and I would know just where to push their established skill set to help them see that they were not at the end of their journey. It was tricky, though. Once, I had a student come in that was a gold medalist in track and field in multiple long-distance running events. This student insisted that they could keep up with a normal class. They could not. By the end of the first class, they were huffing and puffing and could barely stand. They were in good shape. They were just used to working their muscles differently. I couldn't have kept up on a long-distance run. Then, there was the one that bought a single private lesson. He was competing in amateur and semi-professional mixed martial arts competitions, and I went light with him because it was his first lesson. But it was much lighter than he was used to, and than he was expecting, so he decided not to try another class. I had one that asked me to back up my assertion that I was more afraid of a knife than a gun at a range of less than a step. So I set up a game that I called Gun Defense. I got a bunch of squirt guns, had people at close range, made it the rule that the defender had to move first, and the one that got squirted lost. Within 10 minutes, no one wanted to be the one starting with the gun. That included the one who had challenged my assertion. That's not to say that no one ever taught me anything on their first day. Several times I had someone come in the first day and do a move or a strategy that I had never seen before, and I would insist that they show me how it was done. I had not completed my Chin-Na, basic grappling and escapes, curriculum when I was learning Kung Fu as a kid. So when I was a 30-year-old teacher that had an 18-year-old student that had completed a Chin-Na curriculum, I took the opportunity to learn. When I had a woman walking off the street because my curriculum was similar to what she had learned in China as a child before she switched to Tai Chi, I hired her on the spot to run Tai Chi classes. One of my students turned out to be a rated chess player, and I hired him to run a chess club during my dinner break. So I wasn't afraid to learn from my students. But I wasn't afraid to remind my teenage students where they stood in the grand scheme of things when needed. The one thing I never had that I was always afraid of was a student that really was as good as he thought he was. Accurately assessing self and self's abilities is a skill that takes decades to master. I've met 15-year-olds that think they're all that and a bag of chips until they're put in their place. I've met 15-year-olds that think they're useless and hopeless and devoid of any skill even though they're actually pretty good. I feel safe saying that if I want to know how good a 15-year-old is, the last person I'm going to ask is that 15-year-old. Anakin Skywalker is just the kind of student I was afraid of getting in this movie. He is good, but worse than that he knows he's good. He has a very high opinion of his abilities, but every time his abilities are put to the test he turns out to be right. This makes it nigh upon impossible for Obi-Wan Kenobi to control and train him. This leads to Anakin becoming prideful and resentful. He feels confident rejecting his teaching, his teachers, and the living force. This starts him down the road to becoming Darth Vader. He clings to teaching that elevates his sense of self, growing ever closer to the dark side of the Force until he's finally willing to execute a tribe of sand people in his rage. Count Dooku shows us the end of the kind of pride that Anakin is headed towards. Dooku faces off against adversary after adversary without confronting a real challenge until Yoda steps up to the plate. After trying to take Yoda on Force skills, Dooku proclaims that this is a contest that won't be decided by their knowledge of the Force. By which, Dooku really means that Yoda is superior in that regard, and he hopes to move to an arena where that won't be the case. In stark contrast, Obi-Wan keeps uncovering layer after layer of subterfuge, deception, and lies going to the highest levels of the Jedi Order and Senate of the Republic. It shakes his faith in the system and the people, but it never shakes his faith in the living force as a guide to morals and living. I'm glad that I never had a young student that I couldn't handle. This does leave me with a question, though. What should a teacher do if they have a student like Anakin? A student who can back up their own abilities and sees themselves as the pinnacle of abilities? What suggestion would you give to a teacher with a student like that?